Tanya. Good morning, Nikki. Gosh, I hope our next espresso order comes soon. I really do. Driving to a visit. Oh, okay. We're starting our new book today, Amanda. It's new book day, you guys. New book day. Perfect timing. Yes. Perfect timing. We are starting a new book today. It's a really exciting one to start and it's got some really amazing new characters in it. Last time we read this, we were all just like over the moon when we got to these characters because they are so good. It's unbelievable how good this book is. You guys are gonna be so excited. Morning. Good morning, Jillian. Why I closed this, I don't make my coffee yet. Okay. How was everyone's weekend? Did everyone have a good Sunday? I hope so. Made a cup of coffee, turned with creamer away, and they're too good. I'm so sorry. That's truly awful, Nikki. Yuck. It's not good at all. Not good at all. Hey, Sloth. Hey, Kimberly. Welcome back. It's new book day, you guys. New book day. You carve pumpkins and pigs. Vinegar traps do work wonders. Yes, we use that too. We recently had a lot of food pies. I don't know why or where they came from. It's gross. I hate it. But we did use the vinegar trap. We did. Good morning. What did urgent care we couldn't cover? Poison ivy. Oh my gosh, Kimberly, how? Are you okay? You got home supplies too? Or? I just want them to leave us alone. I've never had poison ivy, but it sounds monstrous. Like truly awful. And I'm so sorry. Yeah, they really are awful this year. Pulled mine's off a shed. Oh no, your face. Your face. That's gotta be the worst. Is it so itchy? I've literally never had it because I'm an inside girl. You know, hey Naisa, new book day. Naisa, you're gonna be so excited when you figure out which book we're on now. I grabbed it off the shelf this morning and I was like, oh, that's the book we're on? Guys, when you see my face up close, are you just horrified at what is wrong with my skin these days? Like, do I look like a leper? Like, did leprosy come back just for me? Yeah, that would have been bad, Kimberly. That would have been way worse. I mean, like, it's bad for you, but, like, way bad for kids. It looks like leprosy to me. Hi, good morning. I am indeed excited. You know which one we're on now, you said? You already know. I didn't realize it till this morning. So, you know. It's not scary for you, but that's good because it's scary for me. Have you touched an armadillo? Not in this lifetime, but that's not to say that I've never touched an armadillo. Like maybe in another life. Are you a liberal? Well, I'm wearing a rainbow, so, you know, you do the math. But I might have leprosy, so anything's possible. Yeah, it's really good, you guys. Are you ready? Are you ready? Anyone who knows the series can look at the cover and just know what we're coming up against. And it is one of the, okay, I'm just going to tell you guys something about this book. I know her hair's going crazy. When we read this book the first time, there is a character in this that when my husband, who was not my husband yet at the time that we originally read it, when my husband would hear me read one of the characters here, he laughed so hard. He said it's his favorite thing that I do, like in reading, and he would make me do that voice just like around the house randomly because he thought it was that funny. So there's a character in this book that is funny enough to make someone who's not even in book club just laugh their butt off. Wow, okay, well, you know what, Josh, and it's time for you to get blocked because of that. So there you go, blocked, done. We don't talk like that to my members. Have a nice day, blocked. Yeah, I blocked them, don't worry. We don't play like that, nope. Okay, so I just want you to look at the cover really quickly before we start and look at some of the things that we're seeing. Yeah, Becca and I did it at the same time. So it looks like we have the Red Queen and the White Rabbit. It looks like we have, looks to be Robin Hood over here. And then we've got the Tin Man and some cards and flying monkeys here. Yeah, it looks like the Emerald City is here. This looks to be Merlin, Captain Hook, Peter Pan. That's right, be nice to our people or we'll say goodbye to you. So I want to ask you guys a question before we read this. And this is, I know it's super weird to be here if you don't like any of us. This is like too close of a group for that. This isn't like a slime live where there's like hundreds of people. This is like 30 people who all know each other really well. Okay, so kind of sad he's gone. I wanted to, that's really funny. I knew you wanted to go in on him. I love that for you. Okay, but wait, I want to ask you guys a question before we read. And this, hey, morning Liz, this question is not a question that involves spoilers, so anyone can answer, whether you've read the books or not, completely irrelevant, you can answer this question. And this is a question, this is almost like teacher Sasha for a second, because I studied fairy tales and folklore in master's school, and this is something I learned about in my studies, and I think it's really interesting. So I want to see how many of you know it, and if you don't, I'm going to give you a little bit of info before we read this because it makes a difference. And it's clear that Chris knows this in his writing of this. That would have been hilarious, Anya. I really, I do think that you could beat up any of us. That's true. Okay, so this is my question. What, if anything, is the difference between a fairy tale, folklore, and a literary tale? They're three things. I'll tell you, Amanda, don't worry. Fairy tales, folklore, and literary tales. Is there a difference between them, and do you know what it is? It's okay if you don't. Most people don't, so no judgment. I just want to know if you know. I think it's really fascinating. That's why I'm asking. Because I think it's like a really interesting talking point before we read this particular book in the series, because it makes a difference in this book. I'm sure there's a difference, but I'm not sure what it is. That's fair, Sloth. That's totally fair. Most people do not know. So do not feel bad if you don't know. This is not me trying to shame anyone. That's a great question. Roxy said perspective. Sort of. That's sort of correct, actually. I mean, like, not exactly, but sort of. Brittany said, but I never been confident. Wait, Brittany, I didn't see the first part of your. I just saw the, but I've never been confident. Something to do with one having lessons. Interesting. Okay. I'm actually gonna throw in a different thing because Liz is talking about a like a fable. Oh, you think you know? Tell us, Brittany, tell us. So Liz is correct. A fable has a morality lesson in it, like Aesop's fables. You guys know that. A cautionary tale. Most fairy tales are cautionary tales. That's true. Is it the background, like where it came from? Sort of. That's very close. Nikki and Roxy are on the verge of closest. So I'm going to tell you guys just so we can get into reading. This is really interesting, right? No need to be confident around here, to be honest. Yeah, seriously. We're not going to judge. Folklore has to do with a culture being passed down. True. Yes, it is the lore of the folk, right? Exactly. So here's the main difference between fairy tales and folklore and a literary tale. Fairy tales and folklore were orally passed down from generation to generation, and they usually have multiple types of, or multiple versions of the same story. For example, we find versions of Cinderella in almost every culture in the world, even before they touched one another, which is really interesting, right? So this concept of a girl who is being oppressed and who finds her way out in a variety of different manners goes everywhere from China to Germany to whatever, right? So there's a Cinderella story, not with the word Cinderella, but a Cinderella story. It's called a tale type in all different places. There's a Three Little Bears Goldilocks situation all across the world. There's a Little Red Riding Hood all across the world. Those are fairy tales. They are passed down orally and they span both generations and continents, right? And it's really interesting because if you're reading the Land of Stories, all of the characters in the Land of Stories series that we've read so far are all from fairy tales, right? Because they all are a part of that situation there. Literary tales, conversely, are tales that are written by one person, okay? So they have an author and they started as a written work that was published. That's why they're called literary tales. So those include The Little Mermaid, The Snow Queen, Peter Pan, all things that we know the original author for, and you can pinpoint exactly when it was written, who it was published by, who originally wrote it. Because if you ask somebody who wrote Snow White, nobody knows. Literally nobody knows, right? It's not possible for us to know because Snow White spans so many generations and so many cultures. It would be literally impossible to pinpoint the first instance of it because it was orally passed down. And when something isn't written down, you can't pinpoint it, right? Not really. You can guess a little bit. You can be like, well, they were cave drawing, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But literary tales were first written down and by one person, and there's no instance of them in oral tradition before that. So like Peter Pan did not exist prior. The Little Mermaid did not exist prior to their original writings. So if you look at this book 4 is called Beyond the Kingdoms, and what he means when he says that is like beyond fairy tales, because we're starting to see literary characters. The Red Queen is from Alice in Wonderland. We know that Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland. We know where it originated. We know that L. Frank Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz and where it originated. You know what I'm saying? So like these are all characters that came from one person's mind and were written down. That's not to say that they weren't inspired by fairy tales, but they don't have any prior existence, right? Like it's directly derived from our land. Yes, folklore, like Brittany is saying, is the lore of the folk, and it's something that exists very deeply ingrained in one specific area. Like she's saying in Appalachia, there is a very heavy folklore presence, and that's true. It's very true, and it's really interesting. But it has to do with, it's very culturally specific to that very area. But as we discussed, Cinderella, Snow White, all those, not culturally specific at all, because they span the whole world, right? And you find them everywhere. Okay, this is the book I came on. I remember the mechanics of this book. It's great, right, Jen? And are you so excited to like go in with all the knowledge you have now? gonna grab my glow orb. What's a glow orb? I love that. I didn't know the difference of the other two. Yeah, but you knew that one. So see, that's so interesting. So anyway, I'm very excited. I did a lot of studying of the characters that are in this book when I was in school, and I wrote a lot of papers on them. So if you ever have any questions about them, like obviously it doesn't matter to the Land of Stories, but if you ever have any questions about this kind of stuff, please feel free to ask, because like this is what I went to school for, and I would love to talk about it if people are interested. If people aren't interested, that's totally fine too, but I find this kind of stuff fascinating, which is why I spent my master's studying them. I did an entire semester just on King Arthur, so you know, I'm crazy, but let's get into it. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask. Ooh, that's crazy, Becca. Okay, so let's look at our map, because the maps always change. Oh, it's very different, okay? Yeah, I'm really excited. So previously we always had maps of the kingdoms. This is very different. Look at this. So we've got Camelot, we have Wonderland, Neverland, the Land of Stories, and Sherwood Forest. And there's something in the middle that we need to read here. It's new. It says, the portal potion. With just a few drops, the potion turns any written work into a portal into the world it describes. Now, I must warn you about the dangers of entering a fictional world. Number 1, time only exists as long as the story continues. Be sure to leave the book before the story ends, or you may disappear as the story concludes. Because again, a literary tale is not a fairy tale. It doesn't just exist across everything. It has a beginning and it has an end, written by one person. Number 2, each world is made up only of what the author describes. Do not expect the characters to have any knowledge of our world or the other world. They only know what is within the bounds of their book, right? You can't leave on time. Becca's like, bye. Number 3, beware of the story's villains. Unlike the people in our world and the other world, most literary villains are created to be heartless and stripped of all morals, so do not expect any mercy should you cross paths with one. And number 4, the book you choose to enter will act as your entrance and exit. Be sure that nothing happens to it. This is your only way out. Dun, dun, dun. Oh man, it's so good. I'm so ready. Dedication. To my parents, for always loving and supporting me. There wasn't a parenting book in the world that could have prepared you for my eccentricity. I'm sorry for denting the coffee table with my ninja swords. Yes, it was me. Quote, books are a uniquely portable magic. Stephen King. I mean, deeply scary, you know, depends on your perspective. I might be okay with some of them. Prologue. Ooh, I'm gonna take a sip of coffee. We're getting a prologue. And it's about one of my favorite people. Here we go. By Amanda. Prologue. The Other Son, 1845, Copenhagen, Denmark. In the cozy study of his home, Hans Christian Andersen was busy at his writing desk. High up on a tree taller than all the steeples in the land, a lonely little bird awoke in her nest, he read aloud as he wrote the first sentence of his newest story. The soft scratches of his quill came to a halt, and the author scratched his head. Wait, why is the bird asleep? He asked himself. Why wouldn't she wake at dawn with all the other birds? She may appear lazy and unrespectable if she doesn't. I want the readers to like this bird. Hans crumpled up the piece of parchment and he tossed it into a pile of previous drafts on the floor. He retrieved a new quill, hoping a darker and longer feather would rejuvenate his story.
High up on a tree, taller than all the steeples in the land, a lonely little bird was building herself a nest. He stopped himself again. No, if she's building a nest, the reader will wonder if she's about to lay eggs, and then they'll think this is a story about an unwed mother. The church will accuse me of alluding to something unholy once again. So he crumpled up that paper, and he tossed it along with the other attempts. High up on a tree, taller than all the steeples in the land, a lonely little bird searched the ground for worms. Hans covered his eyes and groaned, No, no, no. What am I thinking? I can't start a story like this. If I say the tree is taller than the steeples, some imbecile will think I'm comparing the tree to God himself, and he'll make an unnecessary fuss. The author sighed and tossed his latest effort aside. Being a writer in the 19th century society could get frustrating at times. The grandfather clock near his desk chimed as it struck 6 o'clock. Hans stood for the first time in a few hours. I think it's time to take a walk, he sighed. Hans took his coat and his top hat off the rack by the door, and he left his home. He was easily recognizable to the other pedestrians as he walked down the street. After a quick glance of his prominent nose and thin stature, there was no denying that the famed author was among the people. Hans tipped his hat to those who gawked at him, and they hurried away before they bothered him. I never thought about that part of writing. Yes, it's not only a part of writing, it's a part of anything that's public. Like, there are times when I start to make a funny video and then I erase it because I'm like, no, someone is going to take it wrong, even though I didn't mean it that way. Like, there's so many things I have in my drafts that my husband laughs at that have never seen the light of day because I just know someone will take it badly. You know what I mean? And I can't, and he's like, but you should be able to put it out. It's so funny. And I'm like, someone will twist it and turn it into something it's not, you know? Like, I don't know if you guys remember this. Maybe you don't, because most of you weren't here yet. There was a time that I painted a table, and I called it a mermaid table, and people got mad because it was the colors of the bisexual flag, and they were mad that I didn't call it a bisexual table, and then I called it a mermaid table. And I was like, guys, it's pink, purple, and blue. Those are pretty mermaid-like colors. Why would you want me to call it a bisexual table? That makes no sense. It makes no sense. And they lost their mind over this. And I was like, you guys, it's a table for my craft room, and I meant it to be mermaid themed. I think we need to calm down. And they were like, well, you're obviously anti-gay. I was like, I don't think you know what that means. So people take things crazy. They really do. It doesn't have to consume my life, right? Like, I don't need everything to be related to whatever. I love mermaids, and they pretty much do consume my life, so it's a mermaid table. That's it. And they just couldn't handle it. They could not take it. And I was like, okay, you guys need help. Like, you really need help. Some people just want something to be mad about. They do. And what I told them, I tell people all the time, you're fighting the wrong person. Like, trust me when I tell you, I am not your enemy. It ain't me, friends. But let's keep going. Eventually, Hans arrived at the Langlini promenade, and he had a seat on his favorite bench. The Ostrand water ahead sparkled in the remaining daylight, and he took a deep breath of salty air, and his mind relaxed for the first time all day. Hey, Isabella. This was his favorite spot to decompress. Whenever his head filled with too many ideas to concentrate or empty of all imagination, a simple walk to the promenade always took the edge off. It was lucky. He would find inspiration in the land, and if he was lucky, he would find inspiration in the land and waters to take home with him. And on occasion, if he was really lucky, the inspiration would find him. Hello, Mr. Anderson, a soft voice said behind him. Hello. He looked over his shoulder, and he was delighted to see an old friend. She wore light blue robes that sparkled like the night sky. She was very warm and welcoming, but she was a stranger to everyone in Denmark except for Hans. My dear fairy godmother, it is good to see you, Hans said with a large grin. The fairy godmother sat beside him. You as well, she said. You weren't home, so I figured I would find you here. Are you having trouble writing this evening? Unfortunately so, Hans said. Some days words flow through me like the Nile, and other days I'm as dry as the Sahara. I'm afraid you've caught me in the middle of a drought, but I'm confident the rain will fall again one day." "Oh, I have no doubt," the fairy godmother said. "I've actually come to congratulate you. I just heard the news that your tales are being published in other countries. The other fairies and I couldn't be happier. You've been very successful in helping us spread the tales of our world. We're very grateful." "No, I'm the grateful one," Hans said. "When you found me as a young man at terrible school in Elsinore, I was ready to give up writing for good. The stories you gave me to craft as my own inspired me as much as the children they were intended for. I wouldn't have found my way back to storytelling if it weren't for you." "No, you give us too much credit," she said. "You knew exactly how to adapt." You knew exactly how to adapt our stories for the current times by adding elements of religion. Otherwise, the societies of today may not have embraced them. The Ugly Duckling, the Snow Queen, the Little Mermaid, and other tales would have been forgotten. But you immortalized them." "Speaking of, how are things in the fairy tale world?" Hans asked. "Oh, they're very well," the fairy godmother said. "We've entered quite a golden age. My darling Cinderella married Prince Chance of the Charming Kingdom. Princess Sleeping Beauty finally awoke from that awful sleeping curse. Snow White replaced her evil stepmother as the Northern Kingdom's queen, and not since the dragon went extinct has there been such celebration." "But my dear, I asked you the same question almost a decade ago, and that was your same answer then," Hans said. "Even as a child, I was being told the same stories. The fairy tale world, you all must be frozen in time." "Huh, if only," she said with a laugh. "This world just moves much faster than ours, but one day I'm confident the world will move as one. I don't know how or why, but I do have faith that they will." They enjoyed the soothing sights and sounds of the promenade, an elderly couple leisurely strolling close to the water, a small dog chasing seagulls twice its size. A father and son flew a kite in the field nearby, while a mother cradled their newborn daughter. The boys giggled as the breeze blew the kite higher and higher into the air. "Hans," the fairy godmother said, "can you remember what made you happy when you were a young boy?" It didn't take long for him to remember. "Well, places like this promenade," he said. "Why?" she asked. "Well, it's a place of unlimited possibility," he said. "At any moment, anyone or anything could appear. A parade could march through the field, a flock of birds from a tropical land could fly across the sky, or a king from a distant country could sail through the waters on a massive ship. I suppose any child is happiest wherever his imagination is stimulated." "Interesting," she said. Hans could tell from the look in her eyes that something was weighing heavily on her mind, and if her question was any indication, it was about a child. "Forgive me," Hans said. "I've known you for so long I'm embarrassed to ask, but do you have children?" "I do," she said, and she smiled at the thought. "I have 2 sons. Both are the spitting image of my late husband. John is the oldest. He's a very happy and adventurous child. He's constantly making new friends, finding new places to explore. Everyone is very fond of him back home." The fairy godmother then went suddenly quiet. "And your other son?" Hans asked. As if she had suddenly sprung an emotional leak, all the happiness drained from the fairy godmother's face. Her smile faded, and she looked down at her hands. "His name is Lloyd. He's a few years younger than John. He's just, well, he's very different." "I see," Hans said. It was obviously a very sore topic for her. "You must forgive me," she said with a long sigh. "I can't hide this frustration anymore. My life's work is about providing people with the keys to happiness, but no matter what I do, I can't seem to unlock my son's happiness." "He's having a difficult time, I take it." Hans didn't mean to pry, but he had never seen the fairy godmother so visibly helpless. "Yes, although I don't believe it's a phase," she said. Once she started on the subject, it was hard for her to stop, but Hans was so eager to hear about it. He put a comforting hand on her shoulder, and the floodgates opened. "This may be an awful thing to say about my own child, but when my husband died, I think something broke inside of Lloyd," the fairy godmother confessed. It's as if his ability to be happy died with my husband. I haven't seen him smile since he was a baby. He likes to be alone. He hates socializing. He barely speaks, and when he does, it's never more than a word or so. He couldn't be more different from John. He just seems so miserable, and I'm really afraid it might last forever." A single tear then rolled down the fairy godmother's face. She retrieved a handkerchief from the pocket of her robes and dabbed her eyes. Must be something he enjoys, Hans said. Does he have any interests? The fairy godmother had to think about it. Reading, she said with a nod. He reads constantly, especially literature from this world. It's the only thing that appeals to him, but I'm not altogether sure he actually enjoys it. Hans thought it over. Entertaining children had always been his strong suit, but not fixing them. He imagined himself in Lloyd's shoes and thought of something that might get a rise out of him. Perhaps reading isn't enough, he said, and his face lit up with a grin. If books... You look very wide awake, but I think you want more sleep. You want more CBs? You want more CBs? Hi. You look so tired. Your eyes are fading. Come on, get some more CBs. No, you're done. You're done with CBs? Are we going to the playmat? You're done with CBs? Yeah. Okay, we might be done with sleepies. We're gonna go to the play area. Okay. You wanna go play? You want out? You want out? You wanted to go in the play area? You ready? Okay, ready? 1, 2. Whee! Yeah. You want mommy to come? Okay, mommy's coming. I'm coming, honey. Honey, give me 2 seconds. Give mommy 2 seconds, sweetheart. Okay. Hi, baby. You crawling for the... Ooh. Okay, can mommy sit here? Do you mind if mommy sits in the chair? You don't need the chair, you're crawling. All right, it's time for Tower of Terror in 3, 2, woo! Look at this. You wanna play with this? Okay, let's keep going, shall we? You wanna keep reading? It's a great book, sweetheart. If books are what he's interested in, maybe there's a way to expand his passion. Oh, what do you mean? The fairy godmother asked, and Hans explained. When I was an up-and-coming writer, I was given a grant by the Danish king to travel across Europe. I traveled all over Scandinavia, through Italy, Switzerland, to England and back. I can't describe how exhilarating it was to see it all with my own eyes. Places that I had only read about. Words never did justice to the wonders I saw. It left a smile on my heart. The fairy godmother wasn't sure what he was getting at. Well, John loves this world too, but Lloyd refuses to leave his room whenever I invite him to come along. What are you doing, you silly bean? Hans raised a finger. Then try inviting him to a world that does appeal to him, he suggested. What if you took him into the story in one of his books? A book. A book. Yes, that's right, a book. He may only be mildly interested in what he reads, but if he actually saw the places he spends so much time reading about, I'm sure that you would get that smile back. Wow, big standing girl, huh? Are you standing? Did you get up to stand? You're so strong. What will you figure out next? I don't know. Do you want to go to your bears? You can go to the bears. The fairy godmother looked out at the sea as if it was an answer to a long-standing mystery that had just sailed in. But am I even capable of such magic? She asked, almost in a trance. I can travel between the realms that already exist, but how can I create them? How can I bring the written word to life? Hans looked around the promenade to make sure only the fairy godmother could hear what he was about to say. Well, maybe you don't have to create anything, he said. What if every story ever told was in a realm just waiting to be discovered? Perhaps happiness isn't the only thing you were meant to provide the keys for. The thought was so enticing and so exciting. The fairy godmother was almost afraid of its potential. What if she could travel to any story as easily as the fairy tale world and the other world? What if she had the power to turn any book into a portal? It's getting late, Hans said, about the even ever-darkening sky around them. Would you like to join me for a cup of tea? This conversation reminds me so much of another story I've been working on called The Story of a Mother. He looked back at the fairy godmother, but she had already vanished into thin air. Hans couldn't help but laugh at her sudden departure. His idea must have been a good one if she couldn't wait even another moment to explore it. Do you want to sit down? Do you want to sit down? You're so standy. Do you want to sit down? Big standy girl. Yeah, you can play with the bears up high now because you can stand, huh? Very interesting. Do you want to sit down? Okay. No, the answer's no. I guess it's kind of like multiverses, right, Roxy? Yeah, sort of. The following weeks were the busiest the fairy godmother's life had ever seen. She locked herself inside the chambers of the fairy palace and worked around the clock. As if she were inventing a new recipe, she searched for components to carefully combine what would make Hans' idea a reality. She read all the books of spells and potions and books of enchantment in her possession. She studied... You sneak. You little sneak. What are you doing? You trying to get on camera, you little sneaky sneak? What a little sneaky pants you are. She was like, I'll get around the corner, just you wait. She read all the books of spells, books of potions, and books of enchantment in her possession. She studied dark magic, white magic, and the history of magic. She slowly patched her creation together, one element at a time, like sewing a quilt. She kept a journal of her progress, frequently referencing it so she didn't make the same mistake twice. And finally, after she discovered the correct ingredients, she stirred them together and let the mixture sit under the moonlight for a fortnight. Her concoction was finally complete. She poured the potion into a small blue bottle. As with any experiment, the fairy godmother needed a good test subject, so she retrieved Mary Shelley's Frankenstein from the bookshelf and placed it on the floor. She opened it to the first page and cautiously poured 3 drops of the potion in, one at a time. As soon as the 3rd drop made contact, the book illuminated like a gigantic spotlight. The bright beam of white light shined out of the book, and since there was no ceiling, it shined directly into the night sky and could be seen from miles away from the palace. The fairy godmother was so eager to see if the potion had worked, she lost all sense of caution. She clutched her wand and stepped straight into the beam of light. She was no longer standing in her chambers of the fairy palace, but she was in a world of words. Everywhere she looked, she saw written text spinning and bouncing and hovering around her. The fairy... Yes, baby? What's the matter, honey? Did you say mama? You need mama? What's wrong? You need help walking? But can you sit down? We're too young to walk. Yeah, we're too young to walk. Let's see. The fairy... Everywhere she looked, she saw written text spinning and... Yeah, oh yeah, we get the mama. She says mama a lot now. And to make her know who it is, I try to say yes every time she says it so that she knows that she's saying, you know, she's calling me. So that she gets the difference. Written text was spinning and bouncing and hovering around her. The fairy godmother thought that she recognized some of the words from the familiar passages in this book. She watched in amazement as the words spread into a vast space surrounding her. Are you a dragon? Honey, are you a dragon? A little bit. We're a little bit of a dragon. They morphed into the shapes of objects that they were describing all around them and gained texture, and soon they created the world all around her. She was now standing in a dark forest of spindly trees. The Frankenstein book and the beam of light emitting from it were the only things that had traveled with her into this peculiar forest. She leaned back through the light and saw her chambers on the other side. The beam of light was a portal. She hoped that it had taken her to where she intended. A flash of lightning across the dark sky made her jump. She could make out a silhouette of a massive Gothic structure with several towers over the top of a nearby hill. Her heart raced at the sight of it. My word, the fairy godmother gasped. It's Frankenstein's castle. The potion. It's worked. I've traveled into this book. She left the world of Frankenstein and returned to her chambers through the beam of light. She closed the illuminating book on the floor with her foot, and the light vanished, restoring the book to its normal state. Yes, she's keeping the Rory spirit alive and well, aren't you? Are you a dragon or are you a dinosaur? Do you want this? Yes. The fairy godmother could barely contain her excitement. She scooped up the potion bottle and ran down the hall to Lloyd's room, certain the news of her latest invention would excite him. She knocked happily at his door. "Lloyd, sweetheart," she said, and stepped into her son's bedroom. What is on my hand? Weird. The room was darker than the other rooms in the fairy palace, especially at night. The palace was very open, but Lloyd had hung a sheet and blankets around his room in lieu of walls for privacy, making it like an isolated tent. Yes, she's definitely our mascot. The fairy godmother's son had shelves of jars full of small rodents, reptiles, insects. However, they seemed more like prisoners than pets, the way that they were desperately struggling to find their way out of the containers. His mother picked up a jar and was sad to see that a moth had died inside, the same moth her son had promised to free just a few days before. Lloyd was sitting in his bed reading The Man in the Iron Mask by candlelight. He was a small and thin child with a plump face and dark hair. He never looked up from reading, even when his mother had a seat at the foot of his bed. "I've made you something very special, my darling," the fairy godmother said. "I worked really hard on it, and I think it's going to make you quite happy." Lloyd continued reading and acted like his mother was invisible. She took the book out of his hands and forced him to pay attention to her. "What if I told you there was a way to travel into your favorite stories?" the fairy godmother teased, and she showed him the potion bottle. "This is a very powerful potion that I've just created, and with a few drops we can transform any of your books into a portal. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't you love to see all your favorite places and characters in person?" Hi. Yeah, is that your Chewy? My sister saw you're on my phone and said, "Is that your slime lady?" Hello, it's me. Yes, I'm the slime lady, or what formerly known as slime lady. Lloyd was silent as he processed the information. For a brief moment, the fairy godmother could see the intrigue forming in his eyes as he looked over the bottle. Her heart soared as she thought that a smile would surface on his face at any second, but to her dismay, Lloyd only sighed. "Traveling can be so tiresome, Mother," Lloyd said, and he returned back to his book. "I'd much rather just stay here and read." His mother's hopes had flown so high only to plummet back to the earth. If this couldn't get a reaction at him, she feared nothing in this world ever would. "Oh, well, never mind then," she said. And she stood to leave his room. "Well, please let me know if you change your mind, huh, little dragon? Hi, little dragon." Too heartbroken to sleep, the fairy godmother wandered the halls of the fairy palace until she came to the Hall of Dreams. She pushed open the double doors and stepped into the boundless space, watching thousands of orbs float around. Each orb represented someone's dream, and she hoped she could make someone's dream come true before going to bed. An intriguing thought came to her as she looked around. She'd spent too much time of her life guessing how to make her son happy. What if her son's biggest dream was just floating around in the Hall of Dreams? If she peered into it, maybe she would discover how to make him happy. The fairy godmother raised her wand and weaved it in a circle. All the orbs in the Hall of Dreams instantly froze, and one large orb in the distance kept moving. It floated toward her, and it landed in her hands. She peered inside of it, anxious to know what her son's dream looked like. Everything was hazy inside, like it was full of steam or smoke. As the haze cleared, the fairy godmother let out a small scream from what she saw. There was destruction everywhere she looked. Castles and palaces were crumbling into the ground. Villages were on fire. The ground was covered in carcasses of every creature imaginable. Yeah, it's not good, huh, honey? It was as if she were looking at the end of the world. In the center of all the chaos, on the top of a pile of debris, Lloyd was perched on a throne. He wore a large golden crown on his head. A chilling smile grew across his face as he observed the obliteration all around him, and in the distance the fairy godmother saw something that made her skin crawl. Shivers went up and down her spine. It was a freshly dug grave, and her name was engraved on the tombstone. The fairy godmother was sick to her stomach. Now it was clear why she could never make his son happy. His biggest dream was her greatest nightmare. I know, honey. Frankenstein wasn't the only one responsible for creating a monster. Whoa! What time is it? 9:20. Okay. That was crazy. Yeah, it's really bad, huh? He wants his mommy to go bye-bye, which is really sad and the opposite of what you want every day. Yeah, which is good for me, but bad for fairy god. Oh, yeah, you need mommy. Okay, I'm right here. Hi. Hi, baby angel. Hi, baby. Okay. Hi. Hi. We don't have enough time to read another chapter, but I was thinking maybe we'll read one of her books. Do you want to read your book? Should we read a baby book? I'm going to close this and restart it so we can have a baby book club cut, but we only have 10 minutes left because I have stuff that I have to do, and it's not enough to read the next chapter because she's been a little grumbly pants, but I will come back in a moment. Baby book club.